Finally, Clemson Sports Talk has come back to Drive Time. Hello, everybody. Lawton Swan back in the saddle once again. It is the show that shakes the Southland. Clemson Sports Talk for you each and every afternoon as you make your way around the great state of South Carolina and beyond, listening to us on incredible radio stations like Fox Sports Radio 1400 in the Midlands, heard around the world on the iHeart Radio application. Download today. It is free. The website, put the .com on it. Doggone it. That's Clemson Sports Talk.com. Great stories, content, and coverage of your Tigers available. $1 for a premium membership gets you 3 months. After that, $63.17. And of course, we are heading into the 20th anniversary of that 63-17 final score between the Tigers and the Gamecocks. And I don't know if there will ever be a more satisfying number put up in the series for Clemson Tiger fans. That one has managed to last 20 years, and it still rings solid for Tiger Nation. It's a What to Watch Wednesday. What does that mean for you, the listener? Well, we set up 10 matchups for you to tune into this weekend, give you a rundown of the day, and then we knock them out. And again, I showed the list from last week. I mean, I just go through, mark them down, think about the storylines, think about the players involved, the national headlines, all of that rolled in to the bag of chips, and we got our list right there, quick flash for you. Don't want to give it all away in a moment. Again, if you're watching, share the show. If you didn't know, yes, it's not just a podcast. It's a radio show, even though some people, when I went on the air a decade ago, thought I wouldn't be around very long.
I listen to sports talk radio all over the nation, but the way you come across makes me sick. You're going to find yourself not on the radio.
And some people really appreciated the show.
Pow!
And so now we are here every day from 4 until 6 o'clock if you're listening live on the iHeart Radio app. If you want to catch the program streaming live, like if you want to catch me recording the show, and there's a little back channel work that goes into it because I got to get connected to iHeart, which I meant to do before I got online with you today, but I didn't. Anyway, that show's probably going to kick off around 3:20 on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So if you got questions, you want to be a part of the show, you can. We'd love to have you hang out with us here on the program today. 803-450-0086. There's your text and phone line. Now, in the NBA last night, a little brawl for it all, if you will, between the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Golden State Warriors, like right out of the gate. Rudy Gobert got tangled up in a headlock, I guess you would say, from Draymond Green. What will Green's suspension be? We'll discuss some of that. I watched it several times. I got a lot of thoughts on it. And, of course, we've got you covered with college football conversations as your Clemson Tigers prepare to take on the North Carolina Tar Heels in Death Valley on ESPN, 3:30 kickoff for that one. I think the most intriguing thing about this, and I've seen it on social media. By the way, if you don't follow us on social media, we are at Clemson Sports on Twitter, and you could probably find us at Clemson Sports on Instagram and something similar. I think it might be Clemson Sports Talk on TikTok. I need to get to 1,000 followers on TikTok. If you're watching the show on YouTube, make sure you ring that bell. Make sure you subscribe. I need to get to 1,000 subscribers there as well. For whatever reason, I've never pushed it. And quite frankly, since we switched to doing the show the way I currently do it, I haven't been streaming the shows as much, but I'm going to do it as much as I can. I know Friday, it's not going to happen. Can't do the show on Friday, but we will be here for you live streaming the show tomorrow. But the radio show on Friday, man, you're all good. Next week, programming note for everybody, we'll do a Monday, Tuesday. We're off for Thanksgiving Wednesday, Thursday, and then we bounce back on, what do they call it? Is that Black Friday? Is that what they call it, where everybody goes out and gets the shopping deals? Well, I've never got to partake in that. As a matter of fact, at one point, when we used to do this show, we would do like the, radiothon, you know what I mean? Like raising money and stuff, and we'd be out and about doing that. And I got to tell you, those days were hectic, dude. I would do 5-8 hours of sports talk radio. And I love sports talk radio. But let me tell you, 5 to 8 hours of sports talk radio, that's a day. That's a day. But thank you for hanging out with us again. Share the show. Tell your friends and neighbors. And if you're so inclined, tell your friends' neighbors, especially if they're Tiger fans, that we're here, because I run into Clemson fans every day in the Midlands and go, I didn't even know you were here. Now, I've never put it on a billboard. Maybe I should. I've just trusted that social media and word of mouth would help us grow. So thank you to everybody who's done that. All right. Here's the thing about Clemson in North Carolina, though, that I would say is a little bit surprising to me at this point, is simply the fact that Clemson comes in favored at the open by 7.5, and it's dropped down to 6.5. And I'm not overly, I don't have like a, oh man, what about that? But it is significant, I feel like, that North Carolina is an 8-2 ball club. North Carolina is a team that many people would make the argument have about the second or third best quarterback in the country. Now, whether or not Drake Maye has played that way at this point, 231 of 351 of the season, passing 3,145 yards, 21 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions, is really up to you. Where do you want to put him in the lineage or the list of quarterbacks to be taken in the upcoming NFL draft? He's certainly one of the top 5 quarterbacks. If you wanted to argue me down off the number 2 to number 3, sure, I'll listen to those arguments. I think number 1, even though his team is not having a stellar year, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, Caleb Williams, I think will be the number 1 overall selection. Michael Penix Jr., given what he's done this year, has a chance to maybe go number 2 off the board and surpass Drake Maye. And then, from there on down, who would it be? But it's hard for me to think Maye's past third for most of the experts in the NFL. Based off of the way draft history goes, has been spurts, maybe a drip under pressure. It's not been great. Like every time I look at the NFL, I see names. Like I look at Justin Fields, and I remember him wowing at Ohio State. And I go, man, he's not exactly wowing in the NFL. And I know he's supposed to, I think, be back for the Bears this week. But it is a different game. And that's pretty apparent when you see guys who have these prolific careers collegiately, who are in the conversation for the Heisman Trophy. Maybe even they win the Heisman Trophy, and then they get to the NFL, and it doesn't translate the way people thought. I'll give you a prime example. Now, I understand how good Lamar Jackson has been in the NFL. I don't want to diminish Lamar Jackson by any means, but I believe outside of Baltimore, where he currently resides, and maybe even in Baltimore, if you said, well, would you prefer to have a guy like Trevor Lawrence? Would you prefer to have a guy like Joe Burrow? The answer is probably yes. So your accolades and what you've won and how you did it at the collegiate game doesn't always translate to the NFL, but I believe Drake Maye fits the mold of what NFL coaches and scouts want. I think Dabo Swinney's comment, I played some of him for you yesterday. I got a chuckle out of the part where he talked about how, Drake Maye was so good he made the popcorn taste better when you're at the ball game. And so the Tar Heels will come in ranked 20th in the country, 8-2, 4-2 in the ACC, sitting in a tie for third place behind Florida State and Louisville, who are on a crash course to hit one another in the ACC championship game. But all that being said, I think Clemson being favored by 6.5 leans a lot towards the belief that this Clemson Tiger defense is going to play really well on Saturday. And I got to admit, I'm not going to say that I was skeptical, okay, of Wes Goodwin heading into year 2. But I think maybe more so than a lot of people, I was cautiously optimistic, but I was really concerned for him. And I don't have like a close relationship with Wes Goodwin, by any means, but maybe more so than most of the staffers there. And I know you might kind of see Wes as a dude that's playing chess while everybody else is playing checkers. But I think Goodwin, because of kind of where he came from to where he is, at least at this point in his existence as the defensive coordinator at Clemson, hasn't gotten that separation that some coaches want to have from everybody else. So that when I've spoken with him, it feels, I always talked about how honest and open it felt like Brent Venables was, maybe more so than most coaches. That guy was, you talk about a gem to cover. Oh my goodness. Give me coverage of Brent Venables all day, every day. I mean, he was amazing because you felt like you were talking to a buddy. You felt like you were talking to somebody that wasn't trying to mask everything and hide all the details. You felt like a guy that was an open book. And I'm sure it wasn't completely, but I get the same vibe around Wes Goodwin. Now, when he started, it certainly wasn't a polished speaker. This was like his first time with a book out in public and going on a speaking tour. It's not like Stephen King. I'm sure Stephen King, when he's doing an engagement, I'm sure it's a lot better than somebody that's day one. And Goodwin's really come around in that capacity. But I was concerned. I really was concerned that given what happened to Brandon Streeter with a bad season, Wes Goodwin was going to find himself maybe somewhat on the hot seat. And a lot of people would say, no doubt about it, that might have been where he is. But look at what they've done over the past 6 ball games. Clemson has held 6 straight opponents to fewer than 200 passing yards for the first time since a 10-game streak back in 2019. And as you can see, Kank 2001 said, I guess that just shows how bad the offense struggled. You'd think they would have won all those games. The defense has been playing at an elite level. The secondary, the safeties, and the corners, Mike Reed, Mickey Kahn, those dudes are getting it done. And you saw young guys last weekend, 4 freshmen, getting interceptions in that ball game for the Tigers against the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Now, it's already weird enough. I know Paul Johnson's been gone for a while. I know that obviously Jeff Collins was there trying to change their system up, and now Brent Key taking over the program. If you'd have ever told me, though, that Clemson was going to get 4 interceptions against a team on their schedule, and that it was going to be Georgia Tech at some point, based off of what we've seen from them, that looked like they were running like an offense from 1894 for so many years, it's kind of like, I don't think it's Georgia Tech. But then it was, and it just continued to perpetuate a streak that's pretty impressive. And it'll be difficult to pull off that same feat 7 games in a row for the Clemson Tigers, especially when you consider the numbers that Drake Maye has put up. I mean, 342 yards passing for Maye against Duke, 244 against Campbell, 310 against Georgia Tech. We'll come back to that one in a minute. 347 against Virginia, 273 against Miami, 442 against Syracuse, 296 against Pitt, 414 against Minnesota, 208 against App State, and 269 yards passing against the South Carolina Gamecocks. Not once this season, not once has Drake Maye been held under 200 yards passing, something Clemson has done, again, to 6 straight opponents. As the late, great Gorilla Monsoon might say, this feels a little bit like the irresistible force meeting the immovable object.
Oh, yeah.
In Death Valley, a couple of good things here for the Tigers, I think. Number one, Clemson fans just don't like North Carolina. The wine and cheese, North Carolina, you know how games have always been officiated in basketball, and Clemson fans can't stand that. They can't stand that. I know you can't stand that. And so I think the stadium, good little 3:30 evening kickoff where the night's going to fall and the lights are going to be on. It's going to feel like a night game in the second half. I think Clemson fans are going to be amped up and ready for this one. But I want to go back to that Georgia Tech game for a minute. Not the Clemson Georgia Tech game, the North Carolina Georgia Tech game. And one of my buddies has YouTube TV, and I'm sure a lot of you probably have YouTube TV, you know, the multicast. And I'm a victim of not being smart enough when it comes down to how I've handled my YouTube TV. You know, you can choose to record every college football game. It's unlimited DVR. I don't choose to do so. I wish I did, though, and I think I'm going to for next football season because, and you can find a lot of games online anyway, but like this Georgia Tech, North Carolina game for me is one where I say, man, I wish I just had that on the television. I wish I could just pull that up right now. Go watch the key plays as YouTube TV puts together. But this is a team that Georgia Tech scored 46 points on. 46. And that leads me right to what Howard just commented. I don't know when Howard commented. Let's see, 31, about 6 minutes ago. He said UNC's defense isn't much better than last season. And so you go back and you talk about the passing stats and the numbers that Drake Maye has put up. But then you have to consider possessions. You have to consider how many times Drake Maye got the football back in his hand because the defense was giving up points. And I think that Georgia Tech game is a prime example of that. The fact that Virginia, and I love Tony Elliott. So thankful that he got that win. What a huge victory for his program, given some of the difficulties that they faced during his short tenure there. But if I look at it, I'm thinking, man, possessions is how North Carolina's winning. Possessions, Drake Maye getting the ball in his hands frequently is why you see those numbers. Is he elite? No doubt about it. There's no question he's a great quarterback. But he's getting a lot of touches. A lot of touches. And what I think Clemson will hope to do in this ball game, certainly, look, you'd love to be able to score frequently on them. Right? I mean, you'd love to see Clemson somehow climb that ladder into the 35, 42-point range. Are they going to get there? Possibly not. But with the ground attack that Clemson's got right now, love what you've seen from Phil Maffa. I still want to see Phil Maffa get 80% of the carries, 75, 80% of the carries. First and second down carries. Will Shipley can do his thing on third down. Shipley obviously looked good this past weekend for Clemson. But I still think that in the running back room, Phil Maffa's got to be the guy. Phil Maffa's got to be the guy. Be able to run the ball against North Carolina, shorten the clock a little bit, still score with the passing game. But I think what you want to avoid is just a track race. You know what I mean? Just a track meet. I don't think you want that if you're Clemson. 803-450-0086. We still have our What to Watch Wednesday segment coming up. We'll catch you also up with what matchups are coming up here in the next couple of days. There were football games yesterday, not major teams, but we'll tell you what that looked like when we get back right here on the show that shakes the Southland. It's Clemson Sports Talk on Fox Sports Radio 1400 the Midlands, around the world on the iHeart Radio app. Rolling along on a Wednesday afternoon. It's a What to Watch Wednesday. We'll give you our 10 games coming up in hour 2, top of the hour, to watch this weekend. But first, I told you before the break, some of the matchups that you missed and some of the matchups that you've got upcoming. Last night, Toledo beat Bowling Green 32-31, a tight one over there in Kentucky. Western Michigan was at Northern Illinois, and Northern Illinois pulled the 24-0 shutout Also, directional school Eastern Michigan. They went and got a win, or they hosted, I should say, a win over Akron. That matchup went to 2 overtimes. Tonight, you got Central Michigan at Ohio, 7 o'clock on ESPNU. Buffalo's at Miami of Ohio, 7 o'clock on ESPN2. Then tomorrow night, you've got Boston College at Pittsburgh, 7 o'clock on ESPN. And Friday night, South Florida's at University of Texas San Antonio, UTSA, 9 p.m. ESPN2. Colorado's at Washington State, 10:30 on FS1. Now, we had a question from Joshua in the comments. Joshua, stick with me because I know during the break I said we'll get right to that one because I think it's a great question, Joshua, but I do have to get in the updated college football playoff rankings. And quite frankly, not a lot of news here. Matter of fact, I didn't need a committee in Grapevine, Texas to tell me what the top 4 was going to look like. I believe if you were here yesterday, I told you exactly what it was going to look like. And Georgia, by virtue of their 2 victories, one over Missouri, one over Ole Miss, have now advanced to the top spot in the college football playoff rankings, sitting there at 10-0 and number 1, passing Ohio State. The Buckeyes drop back 1 to number 2. They're followed by Michigan. Those 2 teams will face off next week. So somebody's getting punched in the face there. I don't know who's going to fall out, what's going to happen, but it is 2 prime college football playoff candidates meeting on the gridiron, and there's a lot of what's the word surrounding Michigan right now. There's a cloud of, what is it? What would you call that? I personally don't think, I think if they were found guilty, they don't need to be in the college football playoff. That's just me. Problem is the clock's ticking. And if they beat Ohio State, it's going to be incredibly difficult to keep them out of the playoff if the College Football Playoff Committee does nothing to pull them out, because I don't think the NCAA is going to make a decision fast enough. So there's a chance that Michigan could be in the playoffs, and there's a chance that the Wolverines could win a national title. There's a chance that in 3 or 4 years down the line, the NCAA could finally stop dragging their feet and go, we're going to take that away. But you don't get to take it away. The memories are there forever. I want the consequences dished out now. And if that consequence is those kids don't get to go to the playoff, then so be it. That's the way it is. Let me tell you something that you don't do as a parent, as an educator, whatever. You can't, your kid can't do something wrong, okay, right now, and then you punish them for it 3 weeks from today. That's not how it works. They're not going to remember why am I being punished for, Dad? You remember 3 weeks ago when you pushed your sister? That's why you're being punished. Go to your room. Doesn't make any sense. The consequence has to happen now. That's who needs to be punished. Because in the future, I agree. Some other kids at Michigan, 3 years down the line from now, don't deserve to be punished for what's happening now at Michigan. But I digress, because I don't know that anything's going to be changed anyway. Florida State checks in at number 4. The top 4 is exactly what I told you I thought it would be. Washington checks in at number 5. Oregon's at number 6. Those 2 teams potentially facing off for the Pac-12 championship. And where it could really get squirrely is if Oregon beats Washington. For where we sit today, with Texas at 7 and Alabama at 8, and Texas having gone into Tuscaloosa and winning that game, this is, I feel like, as tight a race for those 4 spots as we've seen. It easily, to me, justifies the thought process of going to 12, because if you think about it for a second, and there are a lot of people out there, Dabo Swinney's one of them, that have not been in favor of really going to a larger playoff because they feel like it waters down the regular season. And I know we have 2 regular season games remaining. And I know that in this rendition of the college football playoff, the 5 in the future, the 5 conference champs and all that, and if it's 4 conference champs, and based off of what I saw yesterday, it sounds like the Pac-12 is going to continue to exist. It may just be Washington State and Oregon State. I don't really understand all that right now. I haven't been able to read enough about it to pontificate eloquently, so I won't. But it sounds like that league may end up continuing to have a seat at the table. All that being said, taking a look at these top 8 teams, if there was a 12-team playoff, tell me how watered down this is. Who is it watered down for? Certainly those 8 are still vying for some very valuable positioning in the top 4, which grants you a bye. Missouri, who is ranked 9th at 8-2, still in the mix. Eli Drinkwitz's team, one of the most shocking programs this year, outside of the team right behind them, the Louisville Cardinals, who are 9-1 and ranked number 10. Oregon State, DJ Uiagalelei sitting there at number 11 at 8-2. Penn State, number 12. Now, look, I talked a lot about Penn State yesterday. I'm not impressed by the Nittany Lions, but are they one of the top 12 teams in the country? Should they be in a 12-team playoff? Possibly. Give them a chance to go prove themselves. The same could be said for Ole Miss, Oklahoma, LSU. I don't think it waters anything down. I think it makes it better. I think it makes it better. All right, wrapping up the top 15. Behind Oregon State at 11 is Penn State at 12, Ole Miss 13, Oklahoma 14, LSU is 15. Outside of that, not a lot to talk about. We'll hit a break. We'll come back. I'm going to get to Joshua's question about Will Shipley when we return. Stay with us. Clemson Sports Talk on a What to Watch Wednesday. 803-450-0086. That is the text line and the phone line. Feel free to give us a call. Feel free to text us. Not going to put the calls up live right now, so just leave us a message. But I will say, the more I do this, the more I get back in the rhythm. You know what I mean? It is. It's like I've been on injured reserve because I haven't streamed in a while. Once I get back in the rhythm, I'll start taking the calls live here on the stream. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Like, share, subscribe. Also, make sure you go over and find us on TikTok as well. We're trying to get to 1,000. If we can get to 1,000 subscribers on TikTok, we might stop going live on one of the 3 places we go live. We're also on Instagram. So, anyway, you can message questions as well if you don't want to call in. Joshua hits us up. He says, Swanee, do you think Will Shipley stays or goes after the season? And how does that affect Clemson if he decides to go? Okay. Well, first off, and again, he was pretty non-committal about it yesterday. Basically say he's living in the now. That's kind of what Dabo Swinney tells him to do. I talked about that a little bit on the program. But let's talk about what we've learned, okay, about the value of running backs in the NFL. It's virtually none. I mean, there's not a position that I've ever seen in my life go from being you got to have a great one and you got to pay the man to you can find somebody to get the job done. Now, there are players in the league, elite running backs in the league. It's not to say those guys don't exist. All right? But based off of what I've seen from Will Shipley during his time at Clemson, based off what I've seen, That's not somebody they're going to pay a whole lot to come play in the NFL. I mean, I don't know how much he makes in NIL, but to me, running back value with NIL collegiately is probably greater than being a rookie that's drafted, at some point in the third, fourth round. Because running backs collegiately are still getting their names on Chipotle businesses, car dealerships. I don't think Will Shipley, to me, has proven that he's ready for the NFL. His numbers certainly don't stack up to what I expected of him coming out of high school as a 5-star running back. I've never felt like he was on some blistering pace to be, if I were ranking like the top 5 running backs in Clemson history, Will Shipley's not on that list. Is he even on the top 10? I mean, at this point, and again, look, he's got 2 more games in the regular season, another bowl game. But for me, I thought Will Shipley would have been more like the guy we saw a year ago. And I know he's been injured. But that stuff counts. Like that stuff, that's something that's factored in. That's why running backs aren't so valuable anymore in the NFL, because that's being hurt, ACLs, concussions, all those things factor in. Do we want to bring this guy in and have him be a part of our franchise or not? Those aren't my rules. I didn't make them. But that's why you see elite running backs that just are sitting there on the waiver wire trying to find somewhere to go, trying to find somebody to pick them up. And if they do, they're picking them up on the cheap because they're one hit away from being on the shelf for a year. They're one cut away from being on the shelf for a year. And you could say that about every position. I understand that. But the position that takes the brunt of the hits in that league, there was a guy when I was growing up named Shelly Hammonds. Shelly Hammonds was a cornerback that he played running back in high school, but he also played cornerback. He ended up going to Penn State. And there was a game against Boston College where the 2 or 3 running backs in front of Shelly Hammonds, trying to see if I can get this article from the New York Times pulled up here. This is pretty cool if I can pull it up. But anyway, the running backs that started in front of Shelly Hammonds got hurt. And Joe Pa needed a running back. And he knew Shelly could do it. And he put Shelly Hammonds in the game. It won't let me show it to you. Anyway, that dude rushed for 208 yards in a half with touchdown runs of 65 and 48 yards. And he had another 59-yard one that got taken off of the board. This is a guy that was playing defense at Penn State that had played running back in high school. You can go back and find it. Just look up. I Google searched Shelly, Shelly. I think he's, Hammonds, Hammonds, 208 yards. I knew how much because it was a record for them at the time for a sophomore, a freshman, or whatever he was, in a half. In a half. But when they ask him after the game, is that something he wants to commit to? You know what he said? I'd rather be the hitter than the hitee. And he did make it to the NFL, and he played with the Minnesota Vikings as a defensive back. The hitee is the one that tends to take the damage. So for me, and Howard says, it seems like Shipley definitely took a step back this season, and he has been injured. I don't think he's run very well behind this offensive line. Even before they had switched the scheme, I was still saying Phil Maffa's the better running back of the two at this point, for whatever reason. I still believe that. Still think Moffitt should get the bulk of the carries. But I think Shipley needs to either stay at Clemson or stay in college. I mean, he could portal out, but I don't think Will Shipley needs to move on to the next level at this point. I still think there's a lot he needs to improve on as a collegiate running back to make himself more valuable as a pro. Quick break. We'll come back. We'll put a bow on hour one right after this. Final segment of hour number one here on the show that shakes the Southland is Clemson Sports Talk on Fox Sports Radio 1400 in the Midlands. Of course, you can listen around the world on the iHeartRadio app. Now, look, I have been on Paul Feinbaum's show. To be honest with you, when you do this job, if you get an opportunity to be on Colin Cowherd, to be on with Dan Patrick or Jim Rome, and I'm not putting them in Paul's category, okay? They're the next step up. They might even be 2 steps up from going on Paul. But I did go on Paul's show. And I'd go back, obviously, if he called. I've told you guys that. But I'm done. One thing I'm done with when it comes to Paul Feinbaum or anybody else in this business, okay? If you just say stuff to get clicks, like that's one thing. You know, I told you the story about the guy that I posted a premium article on our website. And I put in the thing, when it's premium, I put CST Plus. I put sign up for $1. And the guy said, I wouldn't pay 1 penny. Dude, just keep scrolling. You don't have to say anything. But if you look at our site, clickbait. I'm not doing the clickbait. I'm not going to write articles about Paul Feinbaum when he says something about Clemson. Now, granted, I have a different format than some of the other sites that cover Clemson because I can talk about Paul right here. And that's what I'm going to do because some of the things he said, because we did a show yesterday about Dabo Swinney and Texas A&M. And I see we had a comment come through earlier from Justin. He says, have we lost Dabo to Texas A&M? And what I said here on the program yesterday, and I'll say it again, the $1 million man, Ted DiBiase, always said everybody has a price. There's a price. I believe that price exists for Dabo Swinney. I don't think Texas A&M would pay that price. And even if they were willing to pay that price, I still think for Dabo Swinney, it would be hard to leave what you've built. But here's what Paul Feinbaum had to say about it. Said, does he fit? Absolutely. Dabo Swinney aligns very well from a cultural, that's hard to say, cultural standpoint. Okay, so he did say cultural with A&M. Would he leave Clemson? I think he would. Wait for it. This is the part. They're kind of sick of him. And I think he's sick of them.
So you don't ever have to call back.
And before some Clemsonite comes out of his basement and starts telling me how I'm wrong I am, after a while, that happens. Happens to every coach usually, and there are a few exceptions. Nick Saban, pretty good exception after 17 years, but I think Dabo would be re-energized. I think he would be able to recruit well there. He's a good recruiter. His program has slipped at Clemson. It's not embarrassing, but 4 losses is not the Clemson standard. That's what Paul Feinbaum had to say about it. I'm going to tell you, you're wrong in the sense that Clemson fans are not sick of Dabo Swinney. The Clemson fans are not sick of Dabo Swinney. And the person that wrote in a while back, Caden, I think was his name, that said, Dabo Swinney has delivered for me and my family some of the greatest memories of our life. I don't know anybody No Clemson fan has emailed, texted, called me and said, Swanee, I'm sick of Dabo Swinney. Now, do they get tired of some of what they might label as the arrogance in which Tyler called up and said, you changed after you won the national championship? Are there people that feel that way? Like, you can't question the things that Dabo Swinney is doing. Are there people that feel that way? Yeah, they are out there. But let me tell you how few those are. So few that if you ask that same group of people, you said, well, would you be willing to just let him go to bring in somebody else? About 95% of those people, right? So let's say that it's the 1.5%ers or whatever that Dabo Swinney kind of labeled them. 98% of that group would say, no, we're good. We will deal with these things. We can live with these issues that we have personally. I've said, I was asked this last week about Dabo Swinney. How long could he stay at Clemson? I still believe this. I think it's as long as he wants to stay. If he wants to coach to Clemson until the day he's pushing up daisies, he can do it. I think, look, I can't put him in like, when Frank Howard was coaching a little bit of a different era, and I'm not old enough to know when Frank Howard's time was done, was it like, hey, man, coach, time is you got to go. But I would put him in the category of if he wants to stay, he'll be at Clemson. Would he go to A&M? I said it yesterday. Yes, he would, I think, for the right price. What that price is, I don't know, but I think everybody's got one. If they offered him $22 million, would he go? I'd be hard-pressed to turn down double my salary. I'd be hard-pressed to turn that down. If you push me up to 25, of course I'm going. But that's me. I don't have X million in the bank already. They might say, hey, coach, we'll pay you $22 million. Dabo Swinney might pull up his checkbook, about pass out at all the zeros. I about pass out at the zeros I'm missing. And go, what do I need? Like, what am I going to do with all that? What does it matter if I've got 80 million or 120? And he's happy where he is, and it's not a rebuild. And believe me, Texas A&M might not appear to be a dumpster fire. They might hate that terminology, but there's a lot of work you got to do to get that program in the right direction, in my opinion. All right, quick break. We'll come back. Hour 2. Stay with us.